Adversity and depression inevitably lead to the most profound works of art. It's just simple science. There's no chance Seven would be as profound as it is if the final shot was a post-credits reveal of Gwyneth Paltrow with her head still attached.
What's in the box?
And I can't help but shake the feeling that Buzz and Woody would have been better off melted in Toy Story 3 rather than being forced to face more future rejection when Bonnie grows up. Unfortunately, Hollywood doesn't always have the testes for that, no matter how much better it often works out. I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are 10 depressing alternate movie endings that were way better than the originals. Number 10. Little Shop of Horrors. In the classic version, Audrey 2 is vanquished when she gets a little too big for her roots. Eh? That's a good one. And decides to eat the original Audrey, prompting Seymour to grow a pair and electrocute her to death. But the original ending was far less pleasant, with both Seymour and Audrey killed by the dastardly plant before Audrey 2 and an army of minions basically take over the city in an expensive-looking sequence that was dropped when test audiences reacted poorly to the heroes being killed off. Spoil sports. Number 9. Fatal Attraction. Fatal Attraction's ending was never wholly satisfying, especially as Michael Douglas's character is apparently able to get away scot-free after betraying his wife and shacking up with a mentally unstable sex pot. Obviously, the bunny boiling and the abuse are some punishment for his transgressions, but the film spends way too much time on the dangers of hysterical femininity rather than dealing with the real moral issues. Originally, Dan would have got what he deserved as Alex killed herself and framed him for murder. Sadly, that was all a bit too grim, and the film ultimately went for a more definitive ending for Alex's story when test audiences responded badly to the original ending. Spoil sports again. Number 8. Hancock. Hancock had a lot of potential to be the post-superhero movie that everyone wanted to see, and the original script would have been a vast improvement on how the film actually ended. In the original version, Hancock can't get over his obsession with Mary, but it isn't because she's his perfect match and a fellow superhero. Instead, she's just a normal, everyday lady who he kidnaps and plots to force himself on. That's right, kids. Rape. Now that wouldn't have made it better, of course, but the darker tone would have been far more brave, including a sequence in which Hancock tries, and fails, to kill himself. Unfortunately, Will Smith doesn't do rape and suicide movies, so the script was basically thrown out and rebuilt to be softer and inferior. I suppose you could call it a shit script for wankers, hashtag shit script for wankers. Number 7. The Butterfly Effect. The Butterfly Effect already has a fairly sorry ending, as Ashton Kutcher's Evan realizes that he can't go back in time and save himself from past trauma without costing his loved ones some grave results. Naturally, he eventually goes back and makes sure he never meets Kaylee, his childhood sweetheart, which is clearly the key to fixing everything. And when we jump back to the future, we see she's living a happy life without Ashton Kutcher. Something most of us could only dream of, right? Can I get a high five? Thank you. While that's a bit of a bummer, it's nothing compared to the original that saw him go back to the womb and commit suicide. Jesus f***ing Christ. Incredibly strong stuff. But Hollywood probably still isn't ready for a fetus to off itself. I know I'm not. Number 6. 28 Days Later. For a grim film, the ending to Danny Boyle's seminal zombie epic is actually pretty uplifting, since the main 3 characters survive, which is entirely problematic. This is a world without hope after all, and it felt like a bit of a cop-out for them to skip off towards implied happiness. The alternate ending, however, did it much better. Originally, Danny Boyle wanted Jim to die on the operating table in a much more dramatic fashion, and for the surviving duo of Selena and Hannah to take up weapons and walk out of the hospital into grim uncertainty. Unfortunately for Boyle, test audiences thought they would definitely die too, so he had to make a more affirmatively positive ending for them. Number 5. Terminator Salvation. Considering how awful Terminator Genesis was with its Robo-John Connor twist, it might seem odd to suggest that Salvation would have been better with the same thing happening in the ending, but that's the truth of it. In the original, Connor dies only for his wife to suggest that he should live on in robot form for the good of the cause. They'd steal Marcus's skin, make him look like Connor's, and the Resistance wouldn't lose its leader. Sadly, the ending was leaked and the studio went into a Christian Bale-size rage.
Give me a f***ing answer!
Making a new one instead in which Marcus gives up his heart to save Connor. It's similar, but it's just not as powerful without Connor actually dying. Number 4. Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi's ending is a nice full stop on the original trilogy, with some even feeling that Darth Vader's ultimate defection is a little misplaced, but it could have been better. In the first draft, Han Solo was killed while attempting to destroy the shield generator at the request of Harrison Ford, and Luke is mentally destroyed by his encounter with Vader to the extent that he leaves Leia to finish off the alliance herself. Sadly, George Lucas wimped out and we got a traditional hero ending so as not to ruin any toy sales. Obviously wanted that extra ivory back scratcher. Number 3. Rambo. Rambo is hardly the most uplifting of movies, with its portrait of PTSD and the distinct lack of help that a badly unbalanced veteran receives on his discharge, so it might surprise that the original ending was even darker. In the version we all saw, Rambo gives up and hands himself in when cornered, and he lives on to star in far too many inferior sequels. But in the original, he is left broken by his ordeal and begs his friend Troutman to kill him, who refuses, only to see the iconic angry man take the gun and shoot himself anyway. The idea of a film being a man out of place and killing himself was far better, but Hollywood loves a sequel too much, and he was revived to have his name dragged through the mud for several more films. Number 2. Pretty Woman. Everyone knows the Pretty Woman ending. It's lovely. Edward arrives like a knight in shining armor to save his prostitute with a heart mistress, and sweeps her off her feet by climbing up a fire escape with some roses. The original script was a lot darker though. In it, Vivian was a drug addict, and instead of driving up to rescue her from a life of hawking her body bits around for cash, Edward instead turns up with a large wedge of money to cover the cost of their not at all sordid week together, and drives away without sweeping her off her feet. No romance, just settling a bill. But then Disney came along and thought the original script was too nasty, so they turned it into a fairy tale. With prostitutes. Number 1. Paranormal Activity. Before the franchise was reduced to a series of cheap jump scares and misdirection tactics, Paranormal Activity wasn't all that terrible. It plugged into the needs of the market well, offering a horror fanbase cruelly robbed of anything but scraps something a bit more substantial, and it was deemed a runaway success because it cost so little. The studio loved the money in particular and changed the original script, which saw Katie kill herself grimly in a close-up to camera. Sadly, the franchise appeal meant a sequel-killing ending couldn't be stomached, so Paramount changed it back and took away the film's single best moment. Still, at least the sequels are all great. Hang on. And that's our list. Are there any we missed off? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can even follow me here on Twitter if you fancy. I'm Ben from What Culture, and thanks for watching.